The relentless Oklahoma sun was setting, baking the dusty parking lot outside the county livestock auction barn. Emma Carter stepped out of her rusty pickup truck, squinting into the orange haze as she reached for her son's hand. Little Luke was only 7, his freckled face lit with curiosity, a faded baseball cap jammed tight on his mop of brown hair. The barn doors were wide open, spilling noise and the sharp tang of hay, sweat, and hope out into the air. Trucks lined the field, shiny new ones from bigger ranches and battered old Fords like Emma's, barely clinging to life. Inside, the auction was in full swing. Bidders filled the rows of wooden benches, their boots tapping, hands clutching crumpled bills or bidding paddles. A big red-faced auctioneer barked out numbers faster than Emma could think. Cattle shuffled in circles, their eyes wide. Horses, some sleek and proud, some trembling and thin, waited in holding pens along the far wall. Emma's heartbeat thudded in her ears, drowning out the calls and laughter as she scanned the pens, clutching her worn purse like a shield. She'd been coming to these auctions her whole life, but never with so little to spend and so much at stake. Her ranch was dying, bills stacked up on the kitchen table back home, and every day she felt the walls closing in. If she didn't do something soon, there'd be no home left for her or Luke. She'd promised herself she wouldn't come tonight, but desperation has a way of driving a person past common sense. She hoped, deep down, to find a miracle, or at least a sign she hadn't failed her son completely. Luke tugged her sleeve. "Mama, over there, look." In the farthest pen, nearly hidden in shadow, stood a mare so skinny her ribs made sharp ridges beneath a dirty golden coat. Her head hung low, tail tangled with burrs. A torn auction tag was stuck to her halter, and flies swarmed her back legs. No one stood near her. She looked invisible, unwanted, forgotten. Emma felt a strange pull, a flicker of recognition in the horse's haunted eyes. She squeezed Luke's hand and moved closer, blocking out the jeers from a group of ranch hands leaning on the fence. "Don't bother with that one, miss. She's glue stock," a man sneered, spitting a wad of tobacco. His friends chuckled, eyes sliding over Emma's faded jeans and worn boots. "You got money to burn. Might as well set it on fire." Emma ignored them, trying to steady her breath. The mare flinched as she reached out, but didn't back away. Up close, Emma could see sores on her shoulders, her hooves cracked and overgrown. But beneath the dirt, her eyes still burned, wild, desperate, alive. "She's pretty," Luke whispered, pressing his face to the rails. "Can we help her, Mama?" Emma's throat tightened. She thought of her own family, her father's stern voice on the phone that morning, scolding her for chasing lost causes, telling her to give up the ranch, get a real job in town. She thought of the grocery list she couldn't afford, of the mortgage payment waiting for her back home, of all the reasons this was a terrible idea. But she also remembered her mother's voice, long gone now, gentle and stubborn as spring rain. Sometimes the ones who look the most hopeless just need a reason to fight. The bidding for the mare started so low it made Emma's heart ache. $10, $15, barely the price of a family meal. No hands went up. The auctioneer scanned the crowd, bored already, ready to move on. Emma's own hands shook as she opened her purse, counting out every last dollar she'd tucked away. Money meant for bills, for groceries, for anything but this. She raised her hand. $20, the auctioneer called, sounding surprised. Heads turned. Emma heard the whispers. "That Carter woman, she's out of her mind." Luke's eyes glowed, hope flickering in the darkness. The bidding stalled. No one else bothered. The mare's head snapped up just for a second, her gaze locking with Emma's. Something passed between them, something silent, defiant. Emma held her breath. The gavel slammed. "Sold! To the lady in the back!" The barn buzzed with murmurs, laughter, pity, and scorn. Emma's cheeks burned as she led Luke through the crowd, clutching the bill of sale. Her heart hammered with fear. "What have I done?" But Luke skipped ahead, excited, fearless, already picking out a name for their new horse. The other ranchers watched with smirks or pitying glances, shaking their heads at the foolish Carter woman and her wasted money. As Emma stood at the pen, watching the mare stumble uncertainly toward her, she caught a last look from the auctioneer, a shrug, almost apologetic. "Best of luck, ma'am," he muttered, already forgetting her. Emma reached out, hand trembling, as the mare sniffed her palm, then jerked away. Not trust, not yet, but not rejection either. Luke grinned. "We'll call her Goldie, for the flecks in her fur. She's gonna be okay, right, Mama?" Emma managed to smile, fighting back doubt. She's got a chance now. That's more than she had before. As they loaded Goldie, nervous, trembling, but alive, into the battered old trailer and drove into the darkness, Emma felt the world shifting just a little. She didn't know if it was enough, if hope was ever really enough. But sometimes, you take the last chance because it's the only one you've got. The Carter ranch waited, shadowed and silent, at the end of a long gravel road. As Emma parked the truck and Luke dozed beside her, she glanced back at the skinny mare, who stared through the slats, eyes wide, uncertain but still burning. Maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something neither of them could have dreamed. And in that moment, surrounded by dust, debt, and the impossible weight of hope, Emma decided she would fight for Goldie, no matter what the world thought. The Carter ranch was quiet except for the old windmill creaking and the muffled clatter of Goldie's hooves as Emma and Luke eased her from the trailer to the run-down barn. Night settled heavy over the fields, and the sharp chirp of crickets mixed with Goldie's nervous snorts. Emma felt every worry settle back on her shoulders as she led the mare into the only empty stall, spreading fresh hay in a feeble attempt to make it welcoming. Goldie stepped in, sides heaving, wild eyes tracking every movement. Emma stroked her mane, voice low. "Easy, girl. You're safe now." Luke bounced on his toes, still brimming with excitement. "She's gonna like it here, Mama. Wait and see." Emma wished she had even half his confidence. She hung a battered water bucket and set out a pail of oats, then watched Goldie stare at both, as if they might bite her. The mare's ribs stood out in sharp relief, her neck trembling with every breath. Emma closed the stall gently and tried not to let her doubts show. She could already hear her family's voices in her head. Disappointment, frustration, the unspoken accusation that she'd let everyone down. Inside the house, the mood was colder than the evening breeze. Emma's older brother Mike sat at the kitchen table, nursing a cup of stale coffee. Their father, Hank, hunched over a stack of bills, lips pressed in a tight line. Emma eased Luke upstairs, tucking him into bed and promising they'd check on Goldie at sunrise. When she came back down, Mike didn't look up. "So you actually bought that sack of bones," he said, his voice flat. Emma braced herself. She needs help, Mike. No one else was going to give her a chance. Hank shook his head, not looking at her. "We don't even have enough for our own groceries this week, Emma. You gonna tell me you used what little we had on some half-dead horse?" Emma's cheeks burned. "I did what I thought was right. She reminded me of this place. Down but not out. She's got fight in her." Mike snorted. "You can't pay the mortgage with fight, and you sure as hell can't put food on the table with a horse that probably won't last a month." The words stung because they were true. Emma leaned against the counter, arms crossed, holding back tears. "I'm not giving up on her," she said quietly. Hank finally looked up, his face weathered and worn by too many seasons of bad luck. "Emma, I know your heart's in the right place, but you have a child to think about. Luke comes first." "I know, Dad. I promise I do. But something about that mare, it felt important." Mike rolled his eyes. "Yeah, real important. Like keeping the lights on. That's important too." Emma left them arguing, her head pounding. She retreated outside, standing in the cool dark beside the barn. Through a crack in the wood, she watched Goldie standing rigid and alone, refusing to touch her food. Emma wondered if maybe everyone else was right. Was she just stubborn or truly foolish? Did hope make her brave or just reckless? That doubt gnawed at her over the next few days. Word spread quickly through the small town, and at the diner where Emma worked the breakfast shift, she felt every sideways glance and heard the whispers behind her back. "That Carter woman bought a dying horse. Like she doesn't have enough problems. She'll be on welfare by summer, wasting money just like her daddy used to." Emma tried to drown it all out by working double shifts, taking on extra tables, and barely sleeping at night. Luke, however, saw none of the darkness, only opportunity. Every afternoon, as soon as the bus dropped him off, he raced to the barn with an apple or a carrot, calling softly, "Goldie, I'm here. It's me, Luke." At first, Goldie stood at the farthest corner of the stall, head down, eyes wary. She wouldn't eat, wouldn't drink unless no one was watching. Emma worried the mare might just give up, her spirit finally broken. Each night, Emma sat on the hay outside the stall, murmuring nonsense or singing soft songs she remembered from childhood, hoping her presence meant something. Mike didn't help, dropping bitter comments whenever he passed by. "You know what they do with horses like that in Texas? Sell them for dog food. We could use the cash, Em." Emma ignored him, but inside the fear was growing. If Goldie didn't start eating, if the vet bills started piling up, if her father finally lost patience, what then? Emma spent every spare minute in the barn, gently brushing Goldie's coat, even when the mare flinched away. She tried not to notice how thin she looked herself in the mirror lately, or how the worry lines on her father's face deepened each night. But Luke refused to let go. "I think she likes apples the best," he declared one afternoon, pressing half a fruit through the bars. Goldie sniffed, then, to everyone's amazement, nibbled it from his palm. Luke grinned, triumphant. "See, Mama. She just needed someone to believe in her." Emma watched that moment, a spark in Goldie's dull eyes as she crunched the apple, and felt hope stir despite everything. Maybe it was foolish. Maybe everyone would laugh. But sometimes the world changes on the smallest kindness. A hand reached out, an apple shared, a promise not to give up. Yet every night, after the chores and homework and dishes, Emma stared at the pile of bills and the near-empty fridge. She worried about what would happen if she failed, if she'd let Luke down, if Goldie slipped away after all. Her dreams were filled with running hooves, shadows of auctions, voices whispering she wasn't enough. But each dawn, she rose and faced it again. In the cool, gray morning, she'd find Luke in the barn, Goldie finally lifting her head when he called. And with every small step, every bite of apple or brush of mane, Emma clung to the hope that sometimes faith, no matter how battered, could carry you a little further down the road. And in that battered barn, as the world doubted and debts closed in, a frightened horse and a stubborn woman began the slow, stubborn work of believing together in second chances. The days settled into a rhythm of quiet determination. Oklahoma spring brought mud and biting wind, and Emma felt it in her bones every morning as she trudged out to the barn before sunrise. Her world shrank to the essentials: the clatter of plates at the diner, the hush of the barn at midnight, and the slow, uncertain process of coaxing Goldie back to life. Sometimes it felt as if she was holding her breath through each hour, waiting for something, anything, to tip the scales for or against hope. Luke became Goldie's champion. Each day after school, he'd drop his backpack on the porch and sprint across the patchy yard, a bruised apple or chunk of stale bread in his hand. Emma would find him perched outside the stall, cross-legged in the straw, whispering stories about cowboys and wild mustangs, or describing the adventures Goldie would have when she was strong again. At first, Goldie just stared at him, eyes wary, flanks twitching with nerves. But Luke's voice never faltered, and his faith never wavered. Emma tried to match her son's optimism, though it wasn't easy. She'd sneak minutes between double shifts to scrub the mare's water bucket or brush tangles from Goldie's mane. Some nights she worked until the diner closed, only to come home and creep out to the barn with a lantern, exhausted but unwilling to give up. The house felt heavier with every passing day. Her father and brother barely spoke to her, tension simmering over the cost of feed and the lengthening list of overdue bills. But in the barn, time moved differently. It was a place where Emma could breathe, at least for a while. She spoke to Goldie softly, recounting old memories or humming scraps of songs her mother once sang. She learned to approach slowly, her hands open and visible, her movements deliberate. The first few times she tried to touch Goldie's shoulder, the mare shied away so violently that Emma nearly lost hope right then and there. But Luke wouldn't let her quit. "Let me try, Mama," he said one chilly afternoon. He crawled beneath the stall rail, apple in hand, and sat perfectly still. The barn was silent except for the rain tapping on the tin roof. Minutes stretched until Goldie finally edged closer, nostrils flaring, and nudged the apple from his palm. Emma held her breath as Goldie chewed, her dark eyes darting from Luke to Emma and back again. "That's it, girl." Luke's voice was barely more than a whisper. "We're not gonna hurt you. Promise." The next day, Goldie let Emma touch her nose for a heartbeat, then jerked away, but not as far as before. It was progress, the kind measured in inches, in soft breaths and quiet moments. By the end of the week, Goldie stood still long enough for Emma to run a brush across her neck, shaking but not fleeing. Emma felt a surge of relief, small, fragile, but real. As March dragged on, Emma balanced the grind of the diner with the fragile miracle unfolding in the barn. She'd come home bone-tired, her uniform stained with coffee and fry oil, her mind numb with worry. Yet, no matter how late, she always made time for Goldie, checking her wounds, topping off water, and smoothing hay into a clean bed. Sometimes, when she was sure no one was watching, Emma rested her forehead against Goldie's neck, breathing in the scent of horse and straw, drawing strength from the steady beat of the mare's heart. Still, there were setbacks. Some days Goldie refused food, spooked at the slightest sound, or pressed herself against the wall, trembling. Once, when Emma tried to clean a sore on her leg, Goldie lashed out with her hooves, and Emma barely dodged in time. Her brother Mike's laughter echoed in her ears. "See, she's never gonna be worth anything. Might as well cut our losses." But Luke saw things differently. He insisted on reading to Goldie at night, old library books about horses and dusty paperback westerns. He'd describe green pastures and blue ribbons, promising that Goldie would someday run again. One evening, as dusk settled, Emma found him fast asleep on a hay bale, Goldie's head lowered near his, their breaths rising in the cool air in perfect harmony. Emma wrapped her son in an old quilt, smiling despite herself. "You're a stubborn one, Luke Carter," she whispered, tucking him in. "Guess you get that from your mama." As the weeks passed, Emma noticed small, miraculous changes. Goldie's coat slowly lost its dullness, hints of gold shining through as she regained weight. The sores on her legs began to heal under Emma's careful cleaning. Most importantly, Goldie's eyes softened. She no longer flinched when Emma entered the stall, and once, in the quiet of early morning, she even nudged Emma's hand in search of oats. The hardest part was believing in the future when the present was so uncertain. The bank sent more warnings, and Emma's father barely spoke to her unless it was about money. Every trip to the feed store felt like a gamble, and Emma rationed every penny, stretching meals and skipping her own dinners so Goldie would have enough. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that all of this, the risk, the exhaustion, the late-night doubts, was building toward something important. Late one night, as rain battered the windows, Emma sat in the barn beside Goldie and listened to her breathe. Luke's jacket was slung over a hay bale, and Goldie stood close, calm in a way Emma never could have imagined a month before. Emma ran her fingers through Goldie's mane and whispered, "You're safe now. I don't know what comes next, but we'll figure it out, together." In that small, drafty barn, trust grew in the quiet, slowly, stubbornly, like wildflowers pushing through gravel. Emma began to believe just a little that maybe, against all odds, second chances were real, not just for Goldie, but for all of them. And for the first time in a long while, Emma allowed herself to hope that there was something more waiting for them, just beyond the darkness. If only they could hold on and keep trying, one day at a time. Dawn in Oklahoma always arrived quietly, the world wrapped in blue shadows, dew shimmering on every blade of grass. Emma woke before her alarm most mornings, worn out from working late at the diner but pulled from sleep by a restless hope that something might have changed overnight. One Saturday, she lingered at her window for a moment, watching mist curl over the pasture and the bare branches that scraped the sky. The barn looked small and battered in the pale light. Yet inside, something was different, a kind of hush, a breathless waiting. She slipped on her boots, grabbed her jacket, and tiptoed out, not wanting to wake her father or brother. The door creaked open, and she found Luke already there, curled on a hay bale, a book half open on his lap. Goldie stood at the stall gate, head high, ears pricked, her golden coat flecked with early sunlight. For a moment, Emma just watched, heart thumping. There was life in the mare's stance, a subtle confidence that hadn't been there before. Luke spotted his mom and grinned. "She let me pet her nose. Watch." He moved slowly, hand outstretched, voice gentle. Goldie sniffed his fingers, then leaned into his palm. Emma swallowed hard. It felt like watching the first shoot of green break through after a long, brutal winter. She eased forward, whispering, "Good girl, Goldie. You're safe, remember?" Emma grabbed the curry comb and, with a steady hand, started brushing Goldie's coat. The mare stood still, a faint tremor in her flanks, but she didn't back away. Each gentle stroke loosened clumps of winter hair and revealed more of the gold hidden underneath. Emma worked quietly, lost in the rhythm, and Goldie's eyes slowly softened. For the first time, Emma let herself imagine more than survival. She pictured Goldie cantering in the pasture, head thrown high, sunlight gleaming off her back. She imagined Luke riding bareback, wind in his hair, laughter trailing behind him. The images felt fragile but so sweet she could barely breathe. That afternoon, Emma took a risk. She opened the stall gate and led Goldie, one halting step at a time, out into the morning. The yard was muddy, a patchwork of trampled grass and spring puddles, but Goldie didn't hesitate. She lifted her head, ears flicking, then started to follow Emma to the fence line. Luke skipped alongside, tossing bits of apple to coax her onward. When they reached the wide paddock, Emma hesitated. Goldie had barely left the safety of the stall in weeks. But now the mare pawed at the ground, tossing her head, something fierce flickering in her eyes. Emma clicked her tongue, unclipped the lead rope, and stepped back. Goldie stood frozen for a moment, nostrils flaring. Then, with a sudden surge, she trotted across the field, awkward at first, legs stiff, but then looser, faster, finding a rhythm. Emma felt her throat tighten as she watched Goldie stretch her neck, tail lifting, every step growing more sure. Luke cheered, running to keep up at the fence. "Go, Goldie! You're free! Look at her, Mama! She's running!" Emma laughed, the sound bright and unguarded. She pulled out her phone and captured a shaky video of Goldie circling the field, her coat glinting in the sun. Every step, every kick, every toss of her mane felt like a victory. For a while, Emma forgot about the bills, the town's whispers, her family's scorn. She only saw the horse she'd saved, the horse who refused to quit. Neighbors, curious about the commotion, watched from their porches or paused their chores along the gravel road. Most hadn't seen Goldie since Emma brought her home from the auction. Some shook their heads, muttering about fools and lost causes, but others, especially the kids, pressed against the fence, their eyes wide. Luke, buzzing with energy, pleaded, "Mama, let me ride her, please. Just for a minute." Emma hesitated. Goldie wasn't ready for a saddle, not yet, but maybe bareback, with her son's arms around her neck and his voice full of trust. She knelt, checking Goldie's legs, stroking her cheek, whispering, "Only if you're gentle, Luke, and just once around." Luke scrambled up, balancing with Emma's help. Goldie shifted, nervous at the new weight, but didn't shy away. Emma stepped back, heart pounding, as Goldie took a tentative step, then another. Luke giggled, clutching her mane. Goldie, sensing the boy's trust, relaxed. She began to walk, then broke into a slow, easy trot, circling the field with unexpected grace. Emma's eyes stung with tears. She captured every second on her phone, determined to keep this moment forever. It was proof that even the most broken things could heal, that hope, once given, could grow roots. From then on, Goldie's transformation became the talk of the neighborhood. Emma noticed more faces watching from afar, some curious, some impressed. Even her father seemed to soften, lingering longer at the barn, nodding in quiet approval as Goldie picked up weight and spirit. Each day brought small victories, Goldie taking grain from Emma's hand, allowing Luke to brush her mane, greeting them with a wicker at dawn. The work was still hard, money was still tight, and Emma's shifts at the diner grew longer. Yet every morning, the promise of Goldie's progress kept her moving. One evening, as the sky faded to lavender and gold, Emma stood at the fence and watched Goldie grazing in the dusk, Luke by her side, their silhouettes framed by the last rays of sun. She felt, for the first time in a long while, like things might truly turn around. Goldie wasn't just a horse anymore. She was hope made real, proof that second chances could work magic, even in a world that seemed too hard for it. And as Emma leaned against the worn fence, she realized that Goldie's healing was healing her too. reminding her that with patience, faith, and just enough stubbornness, anything was possible. The world, for a moment, felt wide open, and Emma Carter let herself believe again. By the time the wild roses bloomed along the fence line, Goldie had become almost unrecognizable from the desperate mare Emma had led home from the auction. Her coat shimmered with health, gold flecks sparkling in the sun, and the scars along her legs were fading beneath new hair. Neighbors now greeted Emma with hesitant respect. Children waved at Luke riding bareback around the field, and even Emma's father, Hank, sometimes stopped to feed Goldie a carrot, his skepticism slowly softening. Still, Emma felt the weight of bills pressing in on her chest every night. The ranch was holding on by a thread, and the grocery budget always seemed to shrink no matter how many hours she picked up at the diner. But hope, thin, stubborn hope, kept her moving, and Goldie was at the heart of it. One evening, as she was closing up the barn after a late shift, Emma spotted a faded flyer on the bulletin board at the feed store: Springfield County Fun Show open to all. Ribbons, prizes, community barbecue, all welcome. Luke caught sight of it too, eyes wide. "Mama, let's go! Goldie could win. She's faster than anything now. Bet she could win a ribbon." Emma hesitated, anxiety prickling under her skin. She'd never been one for shows. Too much attention, too many memories of losing and judgment. But Luke was relentless, and the thought of bringing Goldie into the world, proving what she'd become, tugged at Emma's heart. Maybe it was time for everyone to see what second chances could do. They loaded Goldie into the battered trailer, the whole family awkwardly helping, Hank muttering about borrowed luck, Mike grumbling about wasted gas. But beneath the gruffness, Emma felt a thread of pride. As they rattled down the road to Springfield, Luke whispered encouragements to Goldie, promising her treats and victory, as Emma gripped the wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. The showground buzzed with activity, trailers unloading sleek quarter horses, girls in sparkling shirts, seasoned ranchers swapping stories and advice. The Carters stuck out: Goldie's plain halter, Emma's faded boots, Luke's second-hand shirt a size too big. Some folks nodded hello, but more than a few eyed them with curiosity or pity. Their entry in the open obstacle and speed class earned a few snickers. Emma overheard a woman in a crisp hat mutter, "That Carter woman's at it again. Lord, she's got nerve." Emma's cheeks flushed, but she ignored it, focusing on Goldie. The mare stood calm and alert, ears pricked, watching everything but refusing to shrink back. Luke hugged her neck. "We believe in you, Goldie. Doesn't matter what they say." The event began. The arena was ringed with locals, old farmers, giggling kids, ranch wives with cell phones ready to record. Horses ran the pattern, fast, glossy, practiced. When Emma's name was called, she took a steadying breath, squeezed Luke's hand, and led Goldie into the ring. A hush settled. Emma heard the old doubts creeping in. What if Goldie balked? What if she spooked? What if everyone laughed? But then she looked at Luke's face, wide open and proud, and she saw Goldie's ears flick toward her, waiting for a cue. Emma let go. "Let's show them," she murmured, clicking her tongue. Goldie started slow, picking her way through cones, weaving between barrels. Emma jogged beside her, gentle on the lead. Then, as they reached the final stretch, Emma gave the signal, "Go, girl!" and Goldie exploded into a gallop, her stride smooth and powerful, dust flying behind her. The crowd gasped. The speed and grace, so unexpected from a hopeless horse, stole the breath from the stands. Emma heard the woman in the hat mutter, "Well, I'll be." They finished the course in a blur of flying mane and laughter. Luke jumped up and down, waving his arms. Emma hugged Goldie's neck, tears in her eyes. She didn't care about ribbons. She just wanted everyone to see the miracle standing before them. As Emma was untying Goldie's lead, a gray-haired man approached. He wore an old leather jacket, boots scuffed from years of work, and he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who'd seen a lot in life. He tipped his hat. "Ma'am, pardon me. Mind if I look at your mare?" Emma tensed. Protective. "Sure, I guess. She's not for sale, though." He smiled, not offended, and gently ran his hand along Goldie's neck and shoulders, pausing at a faded mark high on her left shoulder. He squinted, then looked closer. "Well, I'll be damned. You see this?" He traced a spot where the hair was just a shade different, a blurry old brand, almost invisible unless you knew where to look. "That's the old Shawnee Hill brand. I rode for them back when they bred the best racehorses in the state. I'd know that mark anywhere." Emma's mouth went dry. "You mean Goldie? She's from a big stable." The man nodded, thoughtful. "Looks like she's out of Lightning's Gold, fastest filly they ever raised. Got hurt bad on the track. I guess when she couldn't race, they sold her off. Happens more than you'd like to know." The realization crashed through Emma. All the whispers about uselessness, the stares, the pity. Goldie had been cast aside just like the Carters sometimes felt cast aside by the world. Written off because of hard times, but still full of potential, just waiting for a chance. Word spread through the crowd. Goldie's heritage, her bloodline, her hidden worth. People approached, suddenly full of questions and congratulations. Emma felt dizzy, overwhelmed, but fiercely proud. As they loaded Goldie for home, Luke bounced beside her. "She was always special, Mama. Just took the right people to see it." Emma hugged him, her eyes wet. She realized that it wasn't just Goldie who'd been given a second chance. It was all of them. Sometimes the world measured value in trophies or pedigrees or money, but standing there in the evening sun, Emma knew. Real worth lived in courage, resilience, and the will to keep going when nobody else believed. She glanced at Goldie, head high, golden in the fading light, and promised herself, whatever came next, they'd face it together. And for the first time, Emma believed they could win. Not just ribbons, but a future. Goldie's surprising victory at the fun show changed everything. Overnight, the battered mare and her struggling owners became local legends. Emma hardly had time to catch her breath. Word about Goldie's bloodline spread quickly in the small towns and ranches that dotted the Oklahoma plains, and what started as whispers soon became visits, phone calls, and a parade of strangers rolling up the Carter driveway in shiny trucks she'd never seen before. It began with a letter in the mailbox, neatly typed, signed by a breeder from Tulsa. He'd heard about Goldie's speed, her rare bloodline, and wanted to make an offer. 2 days later, a man in boots and a crisp hat came by, eyeing Goldie like a prized possession. He offered twice what Emma had ever dreamed a horse could be worth, promising cash up front and a good home for Goldie, along with a list of awards his stable had won. Emma turned him down, her stomach tight. But the offers didn't stop. They only grew bigger and glossier with each new visitor. By the end of the month, Emma had a folder full of business cards, wealthy ranchers, racing stables, even a famous rodeo star who called from Texas and wanted Goldie for his daughter. Some offered new trucks, others cash that would pay off not only the mortgage but every bill and then some. Each offer came with smooth words and wide, eager smiles. Emma could barely process the temptation. Every time she looked at Goldie, standing quietly in the sun, nuzzling Luke's hand, her heart ached with pride and dread. It wasn't just the money that made Emma hesitate. She thought about her family's future, about the way her father watched the mailbox like a hawk, collecting foreclosure warnings with shaking hands. The ranch was on the edge. The barn roof leaked in every hard rain, and the tractor sputtered more than it ran. Emma worked dawn to midnight at the diner, missing Luke's school plays and skipping meals so her son would have enough. She thought about nights lying awake, calculating which bill to pay first, the constant ache of never having enough, of always coming up short. Selling Goldie would solve everything, on paper at least. The pressure grew unbearable. Hank and Mike both saw the numbers, and even though her father never said a word, his silence grew heavier every day. Mike finally cornered her in the kitchen one night after dinner, waving a handful of envelopes. "Emma, look at this. We're 3 months behind on the mortgage. There's a letter here from the bank. They could take the house by July. I know you love that horse, but this isn't just about you anymore. It's about Luke. It's about us having a place to live." Emma stared at her chipped mug, unable to meet her brother's eyes. "I know, Mike. I'm not blind. But Goldie's part of the family, too. And I promised her—" Mike slammed the table. "She's a horse, Emma. We're people. I know you're stubborn, but if you lose the ranch, what's the point?" She left the kitchen, tears burning her eyes, and walked out into the yard where the moon hung low and bright above the fields. The air was thick with the scent of clover and the distant rumble of trucks on the highway. She wandered to the barn, found Goldie drowsing in her stall, and leaned her head against the mare's strong neck. "What do I do, girl?" she whispered. "Am I crazy to think we belong together? Or is it time to let go?" Goldie flicked her ears, calm and patient. Emma felt her heartbeat slow. For a long moment, she stood there in the hush of the barn, the world reduced to the quiet breathing of a horse and the dreams that wouldn't quite die. Luke was the only one who seemed untroubled by the debate swirling around the ranch. He spent every spare second with Goldie, reading to her from books about heroes and underdogs, slipping her apples and promising adventures. But even Luke noticed the tension. One evening, after dinner, he found Emma sitting alone on the porch, staring into the darkness. "Mama, are we going to have to sell Goldie?" he asked, voice small. Emma swallowed hard, pulling him onto her lap. "I don't know, honey. Grown-ups have to make hard choices sometimes. I wish I could fix everything." Luke laid his head on her shoulder. "But she needs us, Mama. And we need her. She makes us brave." Emma hugged him close, tears hot on her cheeks. She wondered when she had last felt brave, when hope hadn't seemed like a luxury. She knew she was being pulled in 2 directions, between survival and loyalty, between saving her family's future and holding on to the miracle that had brought them back together. The next week, as the phone calls continued and the bank's letters piled up, Emma made a decision. She sat at the kitchen table, staring at a check from a breeder out in Kansas, more money than she'd seen in her entire life. She could pay every bill, fix the barn, maybe even take a vacation for the first time since Luke was born. But her gut twisted every time she thought of Goldie leaving, of the empty stall and the silence that would follow. Finally, Emma stood up and walked to the barn, the check in her hand. She found Goldie and Luke together, the boy asleep in the straw, Goldie's muzzle resting near his shoulder. Emma knelt beside them, pressing her face into Goldie's mane, the check fluttering to the ground. In that moment, she realized that some things couldn't be measured in money, that the courage to hope was worth fighting for, even if it cost her everything else. But she also knew she couldn't save her family alone. If she was going to hold on to both Goldie and the ranch, she would have to find another way. As dawn crept over the horizon, painting the barn in gold, Emma made a silent promise. She would fight for her family, For Goldie. For the kind of second chance that only comes when you risk everything for love. And in that early morning light, Emma Carter felt her fear give way to something stronger, a fierce determination that no matter what the world demanded, she would find a way forward. One that didn't require giving up the horse who'd taught her that hope, once found, was worth any sacrifice. Emma barely slept in the days after her decision. The check from Kansas sat on the kitchen table, taunting her with everything it could solve: mortgage, groceries, a fresh start. But she couldn't cash it. Each time she tried, the thought of Goldie alone in some strange stable, far from Luke and the only home she'd ever known, made Emma's hands tremble. She watched Luke lead Goldie around the pasture, both of them laughing, and felt the lines of her dilemma carved even deeper. On a cloudless Friday afternoon, as Goldie grazed quietly in the sun, Emma called the Kansas breeder, her voice steady but gentle. "I'm grateful for your offer," she said, "but I can't let Goldie go unless the sale will do more than save just my family. She's changed more than just our lives. If I do this, part of the money has to go towards starting a community fund for struggling families, so others get a second chance too." The man was silent for a moment, then politely declined. The call ended, but Emma felt an odd sense of peace. She'd drawn her line in the dust. News travels fast in small towns, and by Sunday morning, the story was everywhere. Some called her a fool for refusing a fortune. Others whispered, "That's the Carter woman, always giving away what little she's got." But the local newspaper caught wind of it and printed a story. "Emma Carter turns down big money, demands help for families in need." The article painted her not as reckless, but as brave, her photo next to Goldie sparking something in readers' hearts. Suddenly, people Emma barely knew started dropping by. Mrs. Thompson, the retired schoolteacher, knocked on her door with a covered dish and a trembling voice. "My son lost his job last year. If it wasn't for folks helping us, we'd have lost the house. I think what you're doing is wonderful, Emma." Others called too. People she hadn't seen since high school, a church group from 3 towns over, even a local feed store offering a month's supply of grain for Goldie. Then something Emma never expected happened. The high school's Future Farmers of America chapter organized a car wash to save the Carter Ranch and help families like ours. Kids waved hand-painted signs at passing cars, buckets sloshing, their laughter ringing across Main Street. Donations trickled in, sometimes just a handful of coins, sometimes a folded 20 pressed shyly into Emma's palm. She kept every note, every name, every encouragement, taping them to the fridge as a growing reminder she wasn't alone. The town council called Emma and invited her to speak at a community meeting. She almost refused. Public speaking had always terrified her. But Luke squeezed her hand and Goldie nuzzled her arm as if to say, "We're with you." So on a warm Thursday night, Emma stood before a crowded room in the old Grange Hall, heart pounding, palms sweating. "I know what it's like to feel forgotten," she began, her voice shaking at first. "I know how it feels when hope is so thin it seems impossible to hold on. Goldie was thrown away because people thought she was worthless. But she wasn't. She just needed someone to see her differently. That's what second chances mean. It's what I want for my family, and for every family that's ever struggled like we have." Her words hit home. People nodded, some wiping away tears. Old resentments, built on years of hard luck and rivalry, seemed to melt away for a moment, replaced by something like solidarity. Emma sat down, spent but lighter than she'd felt in years. The next week, the local news came out to film a segment about Goldie and the Carter Ranch. They filmed Luke brushing Goldie in the barn, Emma fixing a loose board on the fence, neighbors arriving with paint cans and tools. A church group fixed the barn roof, a hardware store donated shingles, and the bank manager, once the bearer of foreclosure threats, quietly slipped Emma a letter saying her mortgage had been reconsidered pending community support. Then, as if drawn by hope itself, families who'd once kept their distance began to show up with stories of their own: loss, illness, broken dreams. Emma listened, sometimes crying with them, sometimes simply holding their hands. She realized the thing she'd feared most, admitting she needed help, was what made her strongest. People respected her not just for her stubbornness, but for her courage in asking for a better world. One Saturday, a crowd gathered on the Carter Ranch for a fundraising picnic and second chance roundup. Kids played tag among the hay bales. Goldie wore a new ribbon around her neck, and music drifted from a borrowed speaker. The feed store manager auctioned off a basket of horse supplies. The mayor grilled hot dogs, and Emma, flushed, happy, a little overwhelmed, looked out over her neighbors and realized they were all in this together. As the sun set, casting long golden rays across the field, Emma and Luke took turns leading Goldie around the paddock for children who'd never been near a horse. Goldie seemed to sense their uncertainty, lowering her head so the littlest ones could pet her nose, standing rock still for photos. One girl, quiet and shy, hugged Goldie's neck and whispered, "Thank you for not giving up." Emma blinked back tears. She glanced at her father, who'd always prided himself on going it alone, now laughing with neighbors, his hand resting gently on Luke's shoulder. Mike, always so quick to see the bad side, was flipping burgers and making the other dads laugh. The sense of belonging was almost too much to bear. By nightfall, as fireflies blinked in the grass and the last guests drifted away, Emma knew her world had changed forever. They had raised enough to cover the mortgage, patch the fences, and, most importantly, start the Second Chance Fund to help families in need. She wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in years, she believed it would be something good. Goldie, head high in the gathering dusk, stood at the heart of it all, a living reminder that when hope is shared, it grows. Emma wrapped her arms around her son and her horse, letting gratitude wash through her. Against all odds, they hadn't just survived. They'd inspired a town to believe again. And in that moment, under a sky awash with stars, Emma understood what it meant to be truly rich, not in money, but in love, community, and the power of second chances. The summer sun shone differently now. The fields around the Carter Ranch buzzed with life, wildflowers blooming in the ditches, birds darting between fence posts. The feeling of heavy waiting, of dread and barely getting by, had lifted, replaced by something that felt almost like celebration. For the first time in years, the Carter Ranch wasn't just surviving, it was starting to thrive. Repairs began in earnest the week after the fundraising picnic. Emma woke each morning to the sound of hammers, laughter, and the buzz of neighbors greeting each other as they arrived with tools and supplies. The barn roof was replaced by a crew of volunteers, their voices rising in song as they worked. The sagging porch got new steps. Broken fence rails were mended, and the overgrown vegetable patch was cleared and replanted, row by neat row, with the help of a half-dozen local kids. Even the mailbox, battered by years of Oklahoma wind, stood up straight and shining with a fresh coat of paint. Emma hardly recognized her own home. It wasn't just the repairs. It was the sense of community, of people looking out for one another, that made everything feel new. She felt it every time she passed neighbors on the lane. their waves and smiles no longer hesitant or reserved, but open, familiar, grateful. Hank Carter, her father, seemed taller these days, pride softening his features as he told anyone who would listen about Goldie's miracle turnaround and his daughter's stubborn faith. But it wasn't only the ranch that had changed. Emma had changed too. For the first time in a long while, she let herself hope, not just for her family, but for the whole town. She was invited to sit on the organizing committee for the Second Chance Fund, and though public speaking still tied her stomach in knots, she did it anyway. She spoke at the Grange Hall, at the diner, at the church basement, telling their story not as a tale of hardship, but as proof that sometimes hope needs a little help, and everyone deserves a hand to hold when they fall. And Goldie was the heart of it all. The mare, once a symbol of loss and despair, now trotted the fields with her head high, her golden coat sleek and shining in the sun. She greeted every visitor with a soft whicker, her gentle manner making even the most timid child feel brave. Goldie became a local legend. Kids drew her picture in school, and her story hung on the bulletin board at the library. Emma began to notice how children from every corner of the town came to visit Goldie, sometimes bringing apples, sometimes just sitting quietly by the paddock, as if soaking up her calm, resilient spirit. Luke, of course, spent every waking minute with his horse. He rode Goldie bareback across the fields, laughing with the pure, unself-conscious joy of a child who knows he is safe and loved. Sometimes Emma would find him sitting beside Goldie, head bent over a book, the horse's nose resting gently in his lap. "She listens to everything," he told his mother. "She understands." The community, inspired by Emma's courage and Goldie's transformation, began to build something new. The Second Chance Fund officially launched with a modest but growing pool of donations. The first family helped was the Thompsons, who'd been on the edge of losing their home after an accident left Mr. Thompson unable to work. The fund paid their overdue bills, and the community rallied to repair their porch and bring meals to their table. It was just the beginning. One morning, Emma answered a knock at the door to find a young woman and her son from 2 towns over. They'd heard about the fund, about Goldie, and wanted to know if they could volunteer. Soon, every Saturday became a gathering, neighbors helping neighbors, fixing up homes, tending gardens, and sharing food. Goldie was always there, a patient companion for anxious children, and a gentle nudge for those who'd forgotten how to hope. And Emma's story spread. The local paper ran a feature. From auction to inspiration, Goldie's second chance changes a town. Emma was asked to speak at a nearby school, where she stood in front of a sea of eager faces, her voice steady. "Goldie wasn't just rescued," she told them. "She rescued us too. Sometimes what the world calls broken is really just waiting to be loved." Luke beamed in the audience. Hank wiped away a tear. Even Mike, always the skeptic, clapped loudest of all. One day, a trainer from a neighboring ranch approached Emma. He was kind, his hands gentle as he stroked Goldie's nose. "We'd love to have Goldie visit for a few weeks to teach our kids, just for a while. And I promise Luke can come by any time he likes." After talking it over as a family, Emma agreed, knowing that Goldie could help even more children learn courage and kindness. The small sale to the trainer provided just enough money to finish paying off the mortgage and gave the Second Chance Fund a boost. But more than that, it cemented Goldie's place as the heart of a new tradition. On the day Goldie left for her first visit, the whole town gathered at the Carter Ranch. There were hugs, cheers, and a few tears. Luke handed Goldie a shiny new apple and whispered, "See you soon, girl. You're a hero now." Emma stood back, arms around her family, watching as Goldie loaded into the trailer, calm and confident. It wasn't a goodbye, not really, just another new beginning. Goldie would always have a home here, and Luke would visit every week. She would continue to inspire, to teach, to heal. That evening, the Carters held a small celebration, just family and a few close friends. Emma looked around at the repaired house, the glowing faces, and the framed photo of Goldie in the place of honor on the mantel. She felt the weight of the past years, the struggle, the heartbreak, lifted away by the laughter and warmth that now filled their home. In the cool twilight, Emma walked to the paddock with Luke. They watched the fireflies and talked about dreams, about horses and heroes, about the next family they'd help. The air was thick with promise. Emma squeezed her son's hand and said, "We did it, Luke. We gave hope a home." And in that peaceful moment, surrounded by all they had built and all they had shared, Emma knew Goldie's second chance had become their own. The Carter Ranch, reborn by kindness, was now a place where every life and every heart could begin again. In the months that followed, the Carter Ranch became something new, not just a home, not just a farm, but a place where hope seemed to grow wild in the fields, just like the wildflowers Emma and Luke scattered by the handful. The Second Chance Fund blossomed into a real force in town, not just for the Carters, but for everyone who'd ever known what it was to be overlooked, dismissed, or simply down on their luck. Word about Goldie and Emma's story traveled faster than anyone expected. The local paper's feature was shared and reshared on social media, making its way to towns all across Oklahoma and beyond. People started showing up at the Carter Ranch just to see Goldie, to meet the family who had, against all odds, refused to let go of hope. Sometimes they brought their children. Sometimes they brought old family photos or faded ribbons, wanting to share their own stories of loss and redemption. Emma found herself invited to schools, churches, and town meetings. She stood before rows of bright, curious faces, sometimes nervous, sometimes shy, but always determined to pass on the lesson she had learned. Never give up on anyone or anything that's still fighting for a chance. She told the children about the auction, about seeing the fire in Goldie's eyes, about the nights when hope seemed impossible. She spoke of kindness, of stubbornness, of the way small acts, like a single apple or a gentle hand, can change the whole course of a life. The more Emma spoke, the more the town changed. The Second Chance Fund became a fixture at every town meeting. People who'd never asked for help found the courage to come forward, and neighbors who'd never known each other started working side by side. Old rivalries faded. If a roof leaked or a fence fell, someone showed up with a hammer and nails before anyone had to ask. The hardware store put up a bulletin board for people needing a hand. The grocery started a pay-it-forward tab, and families began sharing meals every Sunday in the church basement. It wasn't just the grown-ups either. Kids who'd been shy or bullied found confidence brushing Goldie's coat or helping out at the ranch. One boy who had always been called trouble showed up every Saturday and quietly became Luke's best friend, his laughter echoing across the fields as they raced bareback through the grass. Emma noticed how Goldie, patient as ever, stood still for hours while children combed her mane or whispered their secrets. In her gentle way, Goldie seemed to know that everyone needed a place to belong. The lesson spread far beyond the ranch. When the annual county livestock auction rolled around, things looked a little different. The auctioneer, a burly man with a voice that could rattle barn rafters, paused before the first sale. He cleared his throat and announced, "Before we get started, I want to say something. Last year, I made a joke about a mare nobody wanted. I was wrong. That horse is now a hero in our community. and the Carter family showed us all what it means to believe in second chances. A hush fell over the crowd. Emma, sitting in the back row with Luke, felt a lump rise in her throat. The auctioneer went on. So from now on, we're starting a new tradition. Every year, we'll set aside one lot, just for animals who've had a rough start. All proceeds from that sale will go to the Second Chance Fund to help families and animals who need it most. The crowd erupted in applause. Some people wiped away tears. Others stood and cheered. Emma hugged Luke tightly, pride and humility mingling in her heart. Goldie, standing just outside, whickered softly, as if she knew her journey had come full circle. As the months passed, the ripple effect only grew stronger. Emma's story inspired neighboring towns to start their own second chance auctions. People who had once given up on themselves, or had been given up on, now found doors open and hands reaching out to help. The simple act of rescuing one neglected horse had become a movement. Emma's phone rang nearly every day with calls from strangers who'd read her story, asking for advice or just wanting to say thank you. She listened to their stories, offered encouragement, and sometimes cried along with them. She realized that the real gift Goldie had given wasn't just survival or even hope. It was the courage to reach out, to trust again, to believe that healing was possible for anyone willing to try. Goldie herself became a legend. She visited schools, libraries, and festivals, each time bringing a quiet magic. Children lined up to pet her nose and hear her story. Some brought their own rescued pets, eager to share in the miracle. Local artists painted murals of Goldie on the sides of barns and shops. A bakery created Goldie's Apple Turnovers, donating part of the proceeds to the Second Chance Fund. One afternoon, after a long day of visitors, Emma stood at the fence watching Goldie graze in the sunset. She was joined by the auctioneer, who had grown to be a friend. He leaned on the rail, silent for a while, then said, "You know, Emma, I used to think some folks and animals just didn't have any use left in them. I was wrong. Thanks for showing me." Emma smiled, thinking of all the people who had said the same thing in their own way. She realized that the lesson wasn't just for the lost and broken. It was for everyone. It was about seeing value where others saw none, about refusing to let cynicism win. That fall, as leaves turned gold and the air cooled, the town held its first official second chance auction. Families gathered from miles around. Animals who'd been overlooked found new homes. Children painted banners with messages of hope. Emma spoke, her voice sure and clear, as Luke and his friends paraded Goldie in the ring. "It's not just about saving a life," she said. "It's about reminding each other that every life matters, every story deserves a new beginning." And as the crowd cheered, as Goldie lifted her head in the golden light, Emma saw that hope, like kindness, was contagious. The lesson of one horse, one family, had become the heartbeat of a whole town, and maybe, just maybe, the beginning of something bigger than any of them could have imagined. The golden days of autumn slipped gently into winter. The mornings grew crisp, the air tinged with the scent of wood smoke and the promise of frost. For the Carter family, and for everyone touched by Goldie's story, life took on a new rhythm, one built on hope, generosity, and the belief that there was always another chance, even when everything seemed lost. Emma found herself pausing often now, simply to breathe and notice the details she once took for granted. The weight of Luke's hand in hers as they crossed the yard, the sound of laughter drifting from the barn, Goldie's gentle nicker as she greeted the morning sun. The ranch was alive with purpose. The fences were strong, the barn roof solid, and the fields shimmered with the promise of next spring's wildflowers. It all felt miraculous, yet utterly ordinary at the same time. Everywhere she went, Emma heard stories, people who had found new jobs with the help of the Second Chance Fund, families able to keep their homes, children thriving, because neighbors reached out instead of turning away. What began as a desperate act to save a single horse had grown into a movement, transforming not only a ranch or a town, but also the hearts of those who once believed hope was for fools and dreamers. It was in small moments that Emma noticed the biggest changes. She watched Mike, her brother, trade tools and jokes with the same men who once laughed at their misfortune. She saw her father, Hank, welcome strangers onto their land with pride in his eyes instead of worry. Even Goldie seemed to carry herself differently, as if she knew her story was no longer just about survival, but about what happens when people choose to believe in one another. One late afternoon, as the sun dipped low and painted the world in copper and rose, Emma walked the pasture with Luke and Goldie. The sky was vast, the air chilly, but the warmth between them felt unbreakable. They stopped at the far fence and for a while simply watched the wind ripple the grass and the birds wheel overhead. Luke leaned his head against Goldie's neck, his face peaceful. "Mama," he said quietly, "do you think Goldie knows what she's done for us?" Emma smiled, running her hand along the mare's silky mane. "I think she does, sweetheart, and I think she's proud of us too." Luke was quiet for a while. "You ever wish things were easier? That we hadn't had to struggle so much?" Emma considered the question. There were days she'd wanted nothing more than relief, days when the weight of the world nearly broke her. But then she looked at her son, at Goldie, at the land that was finally theirs, and she knew that struggle had shaped them into who they were. "I used to wish that," she said softly. "But now, I wouldn't trade what we've learned or who we've become for anything. Sometimes it's the hard times that show us how strong we are and how much we need each other." They headed back toward the house, the porch light glowing in the dusk. Inside, the fire was crackling, the kitchen table was set for supper, and the walls were lined with memories, photos of Goldie, newspaper clippings, drawings from children all over the county. It felt like the heart of something far bigger than any one family. As they sat down for dinner, Emma caught her father watching her with a look she hadn't seen in years, one of contentment, maybe even awe. Mike said grace, his voice steady, giving thanks for family, for community, and for second chances. Goldie watched through the window, her silhouette a golden presence in the twilight. Later that night, after Luke was tucked in and the house was quiet, Emma stepped outside. The stars blazed overhead, brilliant and cold. She walked to the barn, finding Goldie in her stall, calm and expectant. Emma leaned her head against Goldie's warm neck and whispered, "Thank you, old girl, for not giving up, for reminding me that miracles are possible, if we're just brave enough to believe." As she stood there, a gentle breeze lifted her hair, and she felt the presence of her late mother, soft as memory, strong as the land itself. Emma closed her eyes and listened to the quiet, feeling gratitude deeper than any words. In the months that followed, the Carter Ranch became a place of pilgrimage for people seeking hope. The Second Chance auction became an annual tradition, drawing families and animals from miles around. People arrived with burdens heavy on their hearts and left lighter, bolstered by the knowledge that no one was truly alone. Emma's speeches became more confident. She spoke from the heart about the meaning of real wealth. "It's not about money," she'd say to every audience, school children, business owners, or a neighbor sitting across her kitchen table. "It's about the courage to believe in something when everyone else walks away. It's about kindness and community, and knowing that every life, Every single one has value, no matter how broken or battered it seems. Luke began to help run the Second Chance Fund, his heart as wide as the Oklahoma sky. He wrote thank you notes to donors and designed flyers for the auctions. Children flocked to the ranch, and Luke showed each of them Goldie's favorite trails, teaching them how to care for horses and for each other. Goldie aged gracefully, her golden coat a little paler, but her eyes bright as ever. She remained the beating heart of the ranch, greeting every new arrival with a nuzzle or a gentle wicker. Sometimes, Emma would find her standing by the gate at sunset, looking out across the land she had helped to save. On one such evening, as the sun slipped behind the hills, Emma and Luke walked side by side, Goldie trailing behind, surrounded by laughter and the hum of neighbors working late on the fence. The air was filled with hope and the promise of tomorrow. Emma paused, took a deep breath, and spoke the truth she had carried for so long. Sometimes it takes a leap of faith, and a friend no one believed in, to remind us that every life has value, she said quietly. Real riches are found in second chances, in shared hope, and in the kindness we give to others. As darkness fell and the stars wheeled overhead, Emma knew in her bones that their story had become something bigger than hardship or struggle. It was a living testament to the power of hope and to the truth that when we lift one another up, miracles are not only possible, they are inevitable. And so the Carter family, Goldie by their side, walked forward into a future wide open with promise, surrounded by neighbors, laughter, and the kind of riches that could never be measured in dollars, but only in hearts changed, lives touched, and the gentle certainty that hope, once shared, will never run out.